Yes, Josh Shoemaker calling in from Alexandria, Virginia.
Great, nice. Okay. And I would like to move that both council members' voices may be adequately heard in this location.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right.
Great. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to say that we have met the standards for the participation in meetings by electronic communication, and we can start the meeting.
Great. So we thought we would begin with our guests, who we welcome. It's great to have you here with us, and thought you could just tell us a little bit about what's going on in Loudoun and how we can help.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Sasha Brower. I'm the chair of the Loudoun County Housing Advisory Board, and today I also have Theo Stamatis, my trustee vice chair, who does a great deal of work as well with me. So today we're really here to listen and hear what you all are doing, but just to give a brief background on Loudoun County's Housing Advisory Board, we are tasked with monitoring the implementation of Loudoun County's unmet housing needs strategic plan, which was adopted in 2021 by the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. So the Department of Housing and Community Development provides us quarterly updates, and we pay attention particularly to the new units that are coming online in Loudoun County. And we're falling short of those goals, so we are looking at creative ideas to address the need for the housing in Loudoun County. So that's really what our board is tasked with. We also have an annual public hearing for the CBDG grants, so that's also in our purview. And we also have established a advocacy subcommittee, which Theo, I'll turn it over to him in a minute, which we are looking at creative ideas to address the housing need, particularly for building new units. And then we take those to the Board of Supervisors and kind of promote those ideas. And so today I'm just listening in, interested to see what you all are doing and learn more about what's going on in Fairfax County. I think there's a little bit of a different structure, but I think we share many of the same goals for increasing affordable housing and addressing the crisis in this region.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. And again, thank you all, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, for inviting us here this morning. Again, Theo Stamatis, actually, full disclosure, lifelong proud Fairfax County resident. And what Sasha alluded to is we, on the advocacy committee for the Housing Advisory Board in Loudoun, we call it the doer committee, the one that gets things done. And like Fairfax County, which we have looked at ideas that this county has in fact adopted and accelerated when it comes to Fairfax County's affordable housing goals and how it could be replicated in Loudoun. A couple of the things that we work on and discuss on the advocacy committee is multifold, whether it be development on our faith-based community sites for affordable housing, working with our school system on their land for attainable workforce housing, also finding innovative ways to deliver housing in the county. Now, these are three just examples to give you all that we are in fact talking about and looking up to Fairfax County and the great work that's been done. Loudoun is a couple steps behind a county like Fairfax County when it comes to delivering affordable housing, but they are moving the right direction. But we do have a robust group of developers, supportive services that serve on the Housing Advisory Board. We've got folks in the commercial real estate space, folks in the land use space, Sasha being one of the two that we have on our board, as well as Economic Development Advisory Commission and a few others. But it's definitely one where Sasha and I wanted to come here and learn and hear innovative ideas that this council has to delivering housing and how we can work together. Because it's, each locality has its purpose of what they want to do with housing, but it's it takes a village, and this region desperately needs more workforce affordable housing for everybody. So that's what we're here for.
Sasha and Theo, I'm old enough and lived in McLean long enough to be able to say that I remember when Loudoun was, the end of the world. And it's just been remarkable to watch it grow. And I'm glad to hear that you all are working hard on these issues because, as you said, we've been at it for a long time under terrific leadership, and we think we've got a lot of good progress to report this morning. Obviously, always more to do. But we're glad you're here. We look forward to working with you and giving you any help, and hopefully you'll come away with some good ideas. So welcome.
Now Loudon is just the end of the silver line, but I did want to mention, because their board does also still incorporate the continuum of care activities. So we had just had an update. I attended their last board meeting to listen in. There was a great presentation on sort of what Loudon is looking at in terms of homelessness. And also just mention that Navaja, Jill Norcross has stationed a organizer in Loudoun County to help beef up and support some of their actions. And so I think that's been certainly great. It really helped us, as many of the advocates who are doing work in Loudoun went out to testify and talk about the housing budget. So are there any questions of Sasha or Theo, comments before we go on? Thank you. I think before we get into the meat of our agenda, just a couple of general announcements, and wanted to mention that our representative from the CSB, James Gillespie, has been tasked and brought on to in Fairfax City. The city of Fairfax has a new housing and homelessness committee, and they asked him to really go there and bring that leadership. He is still going to check in with us, but is really working there in Fairfax, which is great, and sort of mirroring what we're doing. We welcome HAP, and we have a couple of other seats as we'll be looking at as we come. Believe it or not, we are almost through this fiscal year. It just, I really can't grasp that we're there. So there'll be we will have some terms that may be expiring and terms that we'll still have to fill, but there'll be some focus and conversation on that as we move forward. I did want to say, and I'm hoping that Jill and John will comment on this later after our regular agenda. We did share the link, excellent recording of the Tyson's Alliance about the private sector engagement, which has been one of our task forces that's been meeting. So if you hadn't had a chance, they'll say a little bit about it. And then when you leave here today, you're going to go right to that link and spend your afternoon. Was marvelous. So with that, I think we're
Turn over to
Tom.
So good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. And thank you as always for your time and into this issue. And I'm pleased to present, sort of where we are from a progress standpoint, and also try to provide some updates on some other important issues, particularly given our current context. So David, thank you for steal David's computer. So we're going to just go ahead and up and down, that sounds familiar. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our homelessness response, of course, our update on development preservation, touch on home ownership. I'm going to provide some highlights of the HCD budget, and finish with a couple of thoughts on our federal resources. With respect to our homelessness response, the temporary overnight shelter in Reston continues to be open and serving approximately 90 individuals a night as part of both the temporary overnight shelter and the hypothermia program. The county's hypothermia program, as it does each year, ends at the end of March. So it will continue to run through this month. We expect that the new Fair Ridge shelter is going to open in April. And just for those of you that haven't been following it so closely, the Fair Ridge shelter will serve the families that are currently served in the Embry-Rucker shelter in Reston, as well as the families that had been served in the Patrick Henry shelter in the Mason district, as well as many families who are currently housed in hotels. So it's a major step forward for Fairfax County in terms of its modernizing its shelter capacity for families. At the same time, the capacity that will be opened up at the existing Embry-Rucker facility will be used to provide additional beds for homeless single individuals. So again, that is also a significant step forward. So we will continue to keep you updated on that. I will also just note, as I have, that we previously that we're continuing to work to implement the new state-funded permanent supportive housing program. We are all deeply impatient to get that underway. But I think we are just about there. There have been continued issues in terms of negotiating last points with our state funders, and but I think we are just about there. Just a little bit more about that permanent supportive housing partnership. Again, it's 300 vouchers. It supports both the services and the housing. It's $20 million in value, and we expect leasing to start this spring. So just continue to be patient. We're going to get this underway, and I just want to continue to thank our partners at Pathway Homes. Eleanor and her team have been spectacular partners, as well as the CSB. So, John.
On homelessness, the president just mentioned about clearing out all the places. Sometimes the statement doesn't match the actions. Are there any concerns that folks will leave DC and start walking out to the great Fairfax County?
Can't really speak to that with any authority, but homelessness does not respect political boundaries, and I think it's reasonable to expect that that something of that nature, were it carried out, would have a regional impact.
Have we seen the Fairfax City, this Fairfax Circle and Reston start to folks coming back in there, or how is that? Has that stayed?
With respect to, please.
Do you want?
Well, Marlene has a question.
I have a question.
Yeah, so,
But if
Yeah,
you could, just very briefly, and I might turn to both Tara and Laura and Carrie to help me out with this, but we have seen, with respect to Reston, a substantial mitigation of the challenges that were happening up there. But I would like to turn to Carrie and Laura, whose organization Cornerstones is providing the most substantial direct services to the homeless population there, and then also turn to Tara, if I might.
What was your specific question about this?
We cleared out, right? We found housing for the folks, or has begun to be repopulated. My concern is, okay, that was the concern is, has it, have they come back, repopulated that area? And could we expect that when people leave DC? I mean, there's a word of mouth from the folks that I've seen where they know different places and what's there. And ultimately, where I'm going with this is that communications, right? So we're hit on the budget. We need to have facts and understand what's happening, current events, as we go and ask and press for more dollars and more emphasis on affordable housing with our elected representatives. So thanks, Laura.
So they are not repopulating that area, but as Tom said, the hypothermia prevention program ends on March 31st. We are creating 46 new beds at the Embry-Rucker Community Shelter, but we're serving over 80 people a night across the street at the North County building, and we've got 50 people sleeping on the floor at Embry-Rucker. So there's not going to be enough space for everybody in these new beds. So we'll see what happens out in the community after hypothermia ends.
Yeah. So we have not seen a repopulation of the two encampments just off of Fifth Circle. But we have the hypothermia program obviously going on until the end of the month. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. We are anticipating that closure of encampments in the city will push the population in our direction, all of our directions. So we are anticipating and preparing for that, from a case management and drop-in services perspective. I will also just add, it wasn't a question, but I think it's worth sharing that we have seen some serious violence this past winter associated with the hypothermia program. I wish Joe were here to share this part of the conversation. But there has been an uptick in violence. We did have a attempted malicious wounding at our site at 9640 Fairfax Boulevard, where we'll be building Beacon Landing, where a gun was fired. It was two guests that were in hypothermia that got into an argument, and they got off the bus at Lamb, and the gentleman followed the woman as she walked down to go to the 7-Eleven to buy cigarettes, and pulled out his weapon and discharged it at her feet. She wasn't sure if she'd been shot. She came back to Lamb out of her mind. We took her socks and shoes off to see if she had been shot. That's how erratic and scary it was. And then 2 weeks later, which would have been 2 weeks ago, there was an incident where a knife was pulled, and we had two guests go after each other on the hypo bus on the way to one of the churches, and one of the guests was stabbed. So it's very concerning to us, sort of what's behind all of this. We've been in operation for 34 years and have never had a knife incident or a gun incident. We had both within, so many weeks. So I just share that because I think when we get through this hypo season, it would be wise for some of us that are direct service providers to just get together and talk about, Jill, what's going on, and, Mary and Jerry and some of us and Camilla that really need to think about these things, and what we can learn from it.
If I could just add, the last time I visited you, I think last week or the week before last, there weren't enough seats in the Lamb Center to hold all the people. So there was a gathering of people outside the doors who, were looking in to see if a seat opened up so they could.
Yeah.
The numbers are really high.
Numbers are high, and February was exceptional because it was so cold. So we had a lot of folks in that. So this past week, if it's been a little bit calmer, the weather, that is, we haven't had quite the same numbers. But yeah, our numbers are up, and they've gone up obviously every year since COVID. So.
Marlene, you had a question, then what come down?
If you don't mind, could I just add a little bit of context, just a quick? As we're talking about providers getting together, I think we should think about people already in PSH. Because on the other side of this, I was actually talking to somebody at Fairfax CSB, I think, just talking about this new way that we're seeing, and it actually has a feel of organized crime. So we're working with Fairfax County Police Department where people are taking over units. I mean, we have a ton of units scattered across Fairfax County. And what you're finding is people who are homeless moving into units that are occupied by previously homeless people. And when they're evicted, they just find the next one and they go take over that unit. I mean, this is not just impacting us. I mean, huge communities like Huntington Club have been working with us to help, address their challenges, working with the Sheriff's Department, working with Fairfax County, that some of the supervisors' offices get involved because the community is usually disrupted by this, and there's usually guns involved. I mean, they just had a huge eviction of one of these set of people, and the police had to bring drones in because they didn't know what was in the unit. So we are dealing with a different type of situation as homelessness service providers. And I think, it would be helpful to have these conversations because on the other end of that is the eviction prevention and having people return to homelessness. And sometimes those two collide and some people just end up back on the street. So we are going to see, I think we should expect and anticipate not only with people coming in, as you're talking about, but sometimes they're not on the streets. They're actually in units occupied by other people. And sometimes these are highly vulnerable people. which goes back to supportive services and why we need those dollars.
Thanks, Eleanor. Marlene, you had?
Just a question, Tom, you mentioned, the ending of the hypothermia program. What about what kicks in next, which is the heat relief for, especially for those who are homeless?
So I think what I'd like to do is, when we come back at our next meeting, is to ask Tom Barnett to come and do a briefing on that.
I think this was a very important conversation in terms of what's happening. I think really pleased that we have the new family shelter because that takes some real pressure off for, our vulnerable families and getting the kids at least in a stable situation. The things we've talked about, I think it'll be an excellent way for us to, we'll take this offline. I think this is really a continuum of care conversation and then how it relates to us and our goals towards housing. But we can't ignore that. We are seeing it, but I promise I think we'll set something up immediately with David and our Tom Barnett and folks to circle up on this.
Fleetwood, back to your presentation.
As I was saying, we continue to make progress towards our 10,000 new unit goal by 2034. Go through this fairly quickly. We've delivered 1,149 new units across the county, and we have almost 1,500 that are under construction right now. You may have noticed a rather large hole out front of the building, and it's
People don't dig anywhere these days.
I'm told it's rock asphalt.
Really.
But we're really excited about all of these projects that are moving forward, and including almost 1,000 units in the Tyson's Urban Center alone. So with more on the way here. In terms of pre-development, we have nearly 1,000 units in the pipeline. We most recently, a couple of highlights, Agape House, which is a large senior project. The first phase of that had its financing approved by the board in February. And we expect that they'll be competing for tax credits here this year and are looking forward to that moving forward. We also have requests for proposals out for both our East County and Innovation Dulles Green sites. Together, we expect that those will be, almost 400 units or more, and are real excited about that as well. And then looking down the road, we've got a number of sites that we're preparing to put out for competition for new development. I want to highlight in particular that last one, the Crescent. For those of you that haven't been around for a while, the Board of Supervisors bought the Crescent in 2006 for two purposes. Now, first of all, the Crescent is located adjacent to historic Lake Ann Village, and it's 180 units sitting on 16.5 acres. And the board bought it for two purposes: one, to preserve and expand housing affordability, and two, to promote revitalization and economic sustainability of the village. We just 2 nights ago had our first resident meeting with the residents at the Crescent to begin engaging with them about what their hopes and aspirations are for the Crescent, new Crescent. Had a great discussion with the residents. I want to just publicly thank our partners at Cornerstones, who provide services every day to the residents at the Crescent, for their help in facilitating the discussion with the residents. But we had a great turnout, excellent discussion, got lots of hugely helpful feedback. So we will continue to keep you posted on that, but we're very excited for the Crescent to be moving forward here. And it's just a reminder that some of these things involve playing the long game. And here we are, nearly 20 years after having purchased the Crescent. And it is, it has no debt on it. It has provided outstanding affordable housing opportunities for families now for decades. And now the board's vision for the future is going to be realized. And we're real proud of, sort of the vision that, our predecessors had to acquire the property, and are very grateful for the leadership we have now that is supporting us as we move this forward. So we'll keep you posted there, and very much looking forward to that one moving forward. And so just kind of to give you a snapshot here of all the units that, are in those previous 3 categories or 4 categories, and where they're located. As you can see, we're all over Fairfax County in terms of the work that our partners are doing to deliver new affordable housing. And we're real proud of that, and being able to deliver new housing in communities of opportunity. We have our blueprint notice of funding availability out. As you're aware, we're continuing to work on applications, and we will continue to keep you posted. I know I've shown you this slide before, but just wanted to remind you what we have out now. Our inclusionary zoning programs continue to be highly productive, and I'll have a little bit more to say about that in just a moment. But our WDU program, many of you participated in the process to reform the WDU rental program, and particularly lowering the income level served in the program, which we think is going to be really helpful. And forgive me, the administrative regulations for the WDU program, the updated and revised administrative regulations, are going to be in front of the board for public hearing a week from Tuesday on the 18th. In terms of home ownership, as I said, the admin regulations are moving forward as well to govern the home ownership side. We're continuing to work on streamlining the buying process, and we also are about to implement some additional down payment and closing cost assistance. So we'll keep you posted there. With respect to the advertised budget for FY 2026, board's budget guidance has continued to be the investment of 2 pennies by 2027. And I know that, as we're going to have this discussion a little bit later, but I think AHAC's voice relative to recommendations for budget guidance has borne tremendous fruit, and will continue to do so. I will just note that even in this most difficult budget environment with a tremendous amount of uncertainty, that the county executive has recommended adding an additional quarter penny to baseline. So that is a significant step forward, and we're very excited to be able to utilize that, and are very appreciative of that having been recommended. And I'll close with just a few comments on our federal funding, and I'll sort of lead with, we really don't know yet what exactly is going to happen. And I know that's not terribly helpful, but please know that we have some extraordinarily experienced folks on HCD staff who have worked in these programs for many years, and who are very plugged in the industry. And as soon as we have more information on the federal situation, we will be, we're committed to being very transparent with you about what we hear, what we know, and what the implications might be. I do just kind of, for the uninitiated, I do just want to note that, we have a variety of federal housing programs, in fact, which, form the majority of our funding for housing in Fairfax County. There's the continuum of care funds that serve formerly homeless individuals. and provide for shelter. There is CDBG and home, as well as ESG, which is the Emergency Solutions Grant, which helps with sheltering. And by far our largest program is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is now approximately $90 million a year here in Fairfax County and serves over 5,000 households writ large. So again, we will continue to keep you very much up to date as we know more. And I'm happy at this point to try as best as I can to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, patience is the name of the game, I guess. Let me just add, Tom, from the state perspective, as you all know, we're in that interim period between when the General Assembly has concluded. We're waiting to hear back from the governor on both the budget and other bills that he can either sign, veto, or try to amend. So we'll know a lot more on April 2nd when we go back to Richmond to deal with those issues in terms of the statewide housing, state funding housing issues. We had, I think it's fair to say, a pretty good session with some interesting bills passing. The trust fund continues to grow. There's an interesting bill having to do with, you were talking about down payment help. There's an interesting bill having to do with trying to help first-time home buyers with their down payments, which I'm hopeful about. But I'll be able to report better, Madam Chair, once the governor has had his input and after April 2nd.
Jill had a quick.
Oh, Jill, I'm sorry.
No, I just had a quick question for Tom on the WDU administrative guidelines. Have you been getting is there advocacy needed and support? Are you getting feedback from industry? I know it's been a long time going. Maybe that's for Megan. Sorry.
Might ask Megan if she'd be willing to speak to that a little bit.
Megan,
You're gonna have to.
Sure, just
the WDU.
sorry, Megan, just the WDU administrative guidelines, if you're getting any feedback from industry or more advocacy needed. I know you've done a great job communicating with everyone around it. Pleased with it?
Good morning, everyone. Megan Van Dam with the Development. So we've had a number of different comments come in. There were comments that came in from NAOT that were concerned about how WDUs were transferred between types of units for sale to rental mostly. We worked with them, and the new language has a threshold put into it about 30%. And you can go above it if there's ownership. So the feedback that we had is positive. We did have a few more comments that are coming in for tweaks here and there. I think we will go ahead and publish a revised staff report about that. So these little things about how we phrase pre-qualifications and clarifications about there's one that spoke to policy about LIHTC buildings and how WDs are handled in that. I think overall it's real positive. I think we're in a good place right now. So we're excited to the hearing next week and the adoption.
Thank you. Thanks for all your hard work on that. Appreciate it.
Cookie's had her hand up.
Thank you. Sorry. And I'm not hearing everything perfectly. The problem's on my end. Don't worry about it. Some people are just louder than others. The hyperthermia question.
Hey, Cookie, could you get a little closer to your mic so we can hear you better?
I'll move. Maybe that will help. My question on hyperthermia is, what are the plans once hypothermia closes? We've been working on this for a number of years, and the summers keep getting hotter. They start earlier, and the effects on unsheltered people or those with disabilities who have difficulty regulating their body temperature, so on and so forth, is really getting more dramatic. So do we have any plans for that? I think we had a temporary shelter last year, etc. Thanks.
So Cookie, thanks for your question. I don't know if you're able to hear, but we had a similar question from Marlene, and what we're going to try to do is have Tom Barnett provide a more fulsome briefing on that just as soon as we can.
Okay, great, because I didn't hear everything, but if it's before it, by the time we get to our June quarterly meeting, we're gonna be well underway with heat stress.
And there will be, there'll be work that's being done. And again, I think the Continuum of Care Board will hear earlier, their meeting before we will hear the plans and be pushing it out because that'll be through the homeless service providers. But I think in general, just you heard earlier, we're providing year-round shelter even beyond hypothermia. There's a lot of overflow happening. And so those are some of the things we've committed to go back and talk about. So thank you.
Nick,
And
had
thank
a
you
question?
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cookie. Nick?
Yep, so just one quick comment, the people losing their jobs and the gloom and doom, but just the ancillary kind of benefit of what's going on as we're developing these additional affordable housing units. So just on the corner here, we have 65 full-time employees working right now to build that. By the beginning of May, we had about 150 because we're going to actually start framing. So those are really good full-time jobs for folks for the next 20 months, in different pieces and parts. And it's part of the story and part of the benefit that we're able to create from an economic development perspective as we're, building units. There are not a lot of other multifamily jobs going on right now with the current economy and tariffs and where interest rates are and all of that kind of crazy. So our industry is really holding some of those pieces and parts together. And it's because of the good work that we're doing here in this board and Tom and his team, et cetera. So I just wanted to point that out for folks. Sometimes
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. John?
Yep, thanks. Thanks, Nick. I mean, and before that, you had all the attorneys that had to show up for the planning commission.
Forget the lawyers, never forget the lawyers.
I mean, that's, we've been pushing on this about how do we quantify that and ensure that the investment, right? It's not paying to get affordable housing. It's an investment in the community. And there's so many different ways we need to be able to tell that story. Tom, can I ask you to go back and I'll try to be brief, the PAL check chart? If you could pull that one up. Well, only because I'm a little concerned. Actually, the one before that too, where you do the chart where you have the 10,000. How do we get to 10,000?
Oh,
I'm concerned, right? And I know you have it, and that always isn't the best thing. You go, we got it. Everything's under control. We're fine. I would do that too if I were government because I don't want a lot of overhead. But for us as a council, I'm concerned at how do we get to 10,000 from here, right? So Joe Mondura's here, so I am actually really excited because Joe's here. He can help us think deeper and about the problem. But in my mind, the problem is it takes, and I don't know what the cycle is, in order to have that good idea concept to actually having somebody get a key to walk in a room is 4 years, it's several years. So if we were to get 10,000, right, but that's a significant thing we need to talk about, Nick. How do we get to 10? Is 10,000 just on the books that you can show a slide, or is it a key in the door? Because to get to that 10,000 for our supervisors, in particular for Chairman McKay, who keeps talking about it, you need more. You can't get there from here. How do we get to 5,000 or 6,000? We technically need to get there, in my mind, if I'm generous, in the next 5 years. So we need 5,000 to 6,000 homes. That's a lot, right? So you just showed us charts for 4,000 since 2020. We got them in the books. So as us as a council, we need to be sitting here thinking about how do we get to, if that's a nice number for an elected official to throw out there, how do we get there? And this can't be, Tom's going to make magic happen, right? And it's the housing authority going to figure it out. We should be thinking about how do we get there. And I think part of the answer is, right, the federal government's telling us they're going to cut back, right? We're concerned about what's going to happen down in Richmond. And so it's up to us. And so that's why I'm coming back. This is going to be, Jill's going to help us figure out how to work with industry and how to come back, right? How do we look and go forward? And part of it is telling the story of it's jobs. It's investments. It is the attorneys, the architects, and the folks out there with day labor that's going to come out and help us dig the ditches. It's a great, great story. But we got to go out and tell them, hey, I got a quarter pennies, okay, not enough. Not enough. It's not just about homes. So Joe, I think your experience, with thinking about and planning for budgets, that's something where we can sit down now and think about how do we help Tom get 1,000 over the next 4 or 5 years, so we can get that number that allows that planning cycle, so we can get keys in the door for the 10,000. So, Tom?
Say something. Can I just?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so, thank you. We'll talk more about it when we get into the committee discussion, but I think that, recognizing that there's still a long way to go, the reality is a lot of progress has been made, and certainly the funding is necessary, the funding to serve as a catalyst, because it's not done entirely with.
It's actually a segue. Joe's doing the budget.
Partners.
To Jerry and then the two of them.
One of the things that's gotten us here in the absence of the 2 pennies is the fact that at every opportunity, whether it was thinking schools have now ARPA dollars, or dollars falling out from the general fund or quarterly reviews, those dollars were there for HCD to move projects forward as they were available. And that has been incredibly consistent during the entire time that we've been advocating, with the exception of last carryover. So one of the things that we talked about at our Budget and Legislative Committee earlier this week was doubling down on that advocacy as well. It's really important, as you say, that we're moving towards that 2 penny level. That 2 penny was calculated to be what we needed in order to leverage, again, the other funding to get to the 10,000. But until we get there, there needs to be dollars coming in. And again, quarterly reviews are the most straightforward way for that to happen. So that we don't get to a point where we've got a project that's ready to go and we don't have the funding in place to move it forward. And so part of what we'll talk about, and I guess I'm talking about now, part of what we're going to talk about today is the fact that in addition to the thanks that we need to give, because I think that's important about the fact that there is a quarter penny in the recommended budget, we want that to stay there. The reminder that our suggestion, and to Tom's point, the language in the budget guidance over the last number of years has really been drafted by this group, recognizing that we need to get there sooner rather than later so that those funds are available. The goal is to get there in the current language by fiscal 27, so not the next fiscal year, but the one following. We got a quarter of the way there, because we were 1 penny in, we had another penny to go. That's a big jump for one more budget year. So in the interim, again, doubling down on the advocacy that at mid-year, which is coming up, and at next carryover and following mid-year, there are dollars coming from the operating fund, coming from the general fund, going to housing so that we've got the amount there to move forward. So it's a combination of sources coming in until we get to that 2 pennies, and then frankly, reevaluating whether 2 pennies is the right level. I'm gonna keep going.
Well, I was, thank you, John. Great question. Sort of is a good segue to where we want to go next. Although, Mary, we're going to move into the next part of the agenda.
Because I've asked this before and it's been answered, but I have a little follow-up. John's question is not what you just said, because we don't know what the correct number is, 2 pennies or what pennies. We don't have that analysis of if we put in this much money and this much from here and there every year, where we're going to get by 2034. We just don't have that information built into a model or built in. We don't see that curve as to where it's going over time, and it's based on what we put into it is what we're going to get. How many units, how much money we put in and other things is going to produce how many units by what time. Now I'm thinking like the greenhouse gas charts that you've always seen. If we reduce emissions by this much by this year, we'll end up with this much. And if we do it this way, we'll get hotter. And Tom says he doesn't have the capacity to do that. And I believe it. That's not part of the HCD skill set. But I think the county probably has the capacity to do it. And I think it's the way you have to do it. If you're going to come out with what you want in the end, you have to know what to put into it along the way. So I hope at some point we can, get some help from other parts of the county to figure that out. What is it we need to put in now and next year and next year and next year to get to where we want to be? Because we're just imagining it right now.
So Nick had a comment, and then we'll go to Jerry and start the
Just
budget and legislative
to answer
presentation.
your question, it was Valentine's Day, 2022, when we were awarded. Right, so that application submission was due in October, November, something like that of 2021. Or is it 2022, I believe, went through a process. Honestly, as fast, with almost reckless abandon, right? I mean, we made investments before we had awards of fun. Like we went as absolutely as fast as we could to do that. It still took us just under 3 years to get from the award to the
Start digging, yeah.
which again is real, like 2 9% awards, 2 4% awards, 4 blueprint awards, 2 bonded, like it was a ton. Most deals probably take 4 years to get to closing and then 2 to build. So you're 6 years kind of inception to heads and nets, right? And that's a long time. It's a ton of resources, and it's one of the reasons. The other,
Right, John, that does sound like a lot of lawyers.
yeah, it's a lot of lawyers. Bond call, a lot of lawyers.
Oh, God.
The other thing is, it's important to note that county subsidy and county funding is not the only limited resource we're working with, right? So there's only so many 9% credits that allow us to develop in Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is incredibly competitive so, you know, you could put $1 billion into the housing trust fund. Camille and I will find a way to spend it, but we're going to run out of the other resources that we're usually using on, you know, volume cap, right? 4% deal. Like there's other constraints that we're kind of working within to hit that number. So it really is a bit of a nuanced dance to try to figure out how much more we can get and use the lever and how we would put that together. So there are a lot of pieces and parts to it.
That was really helpful to always think about the timeline. And then I'll just add before turning it over to Jerry. And what we did communicate is then the services, which are always left out, to support the 279 new residents who are going to call that place home in 2 years. And the childcare center will be able to hire from the community and those jobs that are created and helping people build income, but that is not included. And so as we continue our story, that is something that I think AHAC has done. And particularly when we're talking about, you've just heard it, permanent supportive housing, housing for the most vulnerable is not just housing. It's housing plus. So with that, Jerry, we'll turn it to you to continue the conversation, but to give people some
Nick, you convinced us there's no one noodle lasagna that is going to make it. We had a very busy week as a budget legislative committee, and I'm very thankful that on Monday we finally had a committee meeting, and it was terrific because we grappled with all the issues that are laying face up on the table for the budget, and got input from a quite expert group of people that prepared us for what then became a meeting yesterday with Chairman McKay, where we went through and asked the questions of him about how is the budget in formation and what is his strategy and what is our best advocacy coming into this very challenging year. I would say it's a year in which the term Eleanor Roosevelt used in 1940 when she went to the convention to elect the next president and her 2-term husband didn't go. She said it's no ordinary time. And I think our perception from the meeting yesterday is we need to be empathetic to members of the board who are receiving so much pressure on so many different fronts, that this is a year of extraordinary need for us to be compassionate and at one with getting the best things done. So in a meeting on Monday, we did talk about strong support for the quarter pennies, strong support for the Fair Ridge project, which, you know, already budgeted in there, strong support for no cuts to the staffing for HCD. And we had argued successfully for 5 the year before to be headed to staff. the expertise of that staff is a gem for us to get so many projects up and running, that we need to be grateful for that, and we need to be drawing upon the goodness created through that engine. So we did also talk about a very unusual big chunk of budget formation, which will be the possibility on March 18th of establishing a meals tax for the county. Something that's already being done in many jurisdictions within the county, but could be a new revenue source that has to counterbalance the ever increasing tax rate on homes versus a different way of funding the budget. So very robust conversations on that. I don't know whether anybody else from the budget committee wants to speak, but I think we had a very robust conversation. We have many, many good heads thinking about how to optimize this year. We want to come out of this meeting with the license to do as we've done in past years, is for a smaller drafting committee to put together the AHAC position. You know, it's more than just HCD. It's also the wraparound services that everybody knows is so essential to the success, particularly for housing for those most on the margins of our economy. And we would like to draw a perspective from anybody else here, but Joe is the master of the nuanced rest of how do you get towards the 2027 success of 2 pennies. Even if we may need 4 pennies, it still is getting to that success that we really want to pursue right now. So Joe, I don't know whether you want to offer any additional remarks, but.
Relative to strategy, one of the other things that we talked about in depth on Monday was various opportunities. So certainly the language is an important component of the advocacy, and the license to draft, as Chair indicated, is important. But then also strategizing about how those that advocacy is provided to the board and the community. Got the public hearing opportunity, but we also have all of the district meetings that have started. I think the next one is Monday, and will continue through early April with board members in their communities or online or televised with call-in, where our voices providing that consistent message are always helpful. One of the things that's maybe a little bit different this year in terms of the timing, because typically the advertisement for the tax rate and the opportunity for meals tax would have already passed. But because of some changes to the General Assembly and the timing, that's not going to happen until the 18th. And so I think the other thing we talked about was providing, again, a statement of appreciation and potentially support for the meals tax in advance of that advertisement. Again, it's a slightly different nuance from the past because of the timing.
Mary?
Yeah, two questions. One is, I understand that they're going to advertise the meals tax. We want to do it somewhere between 1% and 6%, which is the allowable range. Is that what Jeff said to you guys?
He didn't give us a specific number, but from his perspective, it's most important to get it in, to begin that process, rather than, you know, I've made arguments in public about.
No, I'm just asking about the advertised range. You're talking.
Yes, it's good. That's how it's going to be advertised.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and the second question is, I think you should tell us a little bit about what you want us to advocate rather than just saying, you guys go draft it. I think we should have a little bit of a discussion on what the points would be. And
I already said a little bit of that. It's clearly strong support for the quarter penny that was advertised, so that doesn't come out.
But what else? I mean, there's a lot of.
Fair Ridge project, which was also a monumental amount in the.
So we're not gonna ask for anything else but what we have?
Marlene?
Well, it strikes me that what we need to do is think of this as doing the advocacy in two stages. The first stage would be to send a fairly short and pithy recommendation to the board about what to advertise vis-a-vis the meals tax on the 18th. That precedes the budget hearings by almost a month. And then think about what the larger picture is that we want to talk about, including the budget guidance for the budget here period. And, budget hearings are the week of April 21st. So that's a month after the decision on the advertising the tax rate. So it's kind of a two-stage thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the tax rate if the meals tax is gonna be advertised at 1 to 6, I wouldn't ask for anything different than that in the advertising of it. And the 1.5% property tax rate, I don't think I'd ask for that to change. I don't think we should ask for that to change.
They have to advertise an upper level.
Yeah, 1 to 6% meals tax. 6 would be upper level, and 1.5 pennies on the 100.
I don't think they can do that. I think they have to advertise an actual rate, right? They can't say it's gonna be 1 to 6. That's what the law allows.
They're going to choose a rate.
Yeah, they have to advertise.
It has to be between those things, yes.
They have to pick a rate. They can't just say up to 6%.
The law allows
Yeah.
1 to 6%, but when they advertise it, just like the property tax, they have to say a rate. They can't go when they actually adopt the budget, they can't, it's a ceiling, not a floor. In other words, they can go lower, but they can't go higher. That's on all taxes, not just the means. Everything. That's what the rules are.
Correct.
Well, if they have to do that, I would recommend 5% as an advertised rate. Because that's what they have in Arlington. Alexandria is going for that. Montgomery's at 6%. That gives us some, a little bit of room.
Joe?
And unfortunately, I was in the meeting yesterday, but if I'm hearing Jerry correctly, and it's consistent with what we talked about at the committee meeting on Monday, it seems to me that the most important element of the budget this year is that the conversation about the meals tax is on the table and ultimately is enacted. The reality of it, once it's in place, is that it can be adjusted in the future. And so I'm sort of less concerned about what the amount is, and more concerned that it's included. I think that what the discussion that's occurred so far is 3 cents or 4 cents, 3% or 4%. And that seems to me reasonable to start.
Yeah, my sense, and I'm not sure, benefit of the whole group, Jerry and Carrie and I met with Chairman McKay yesterday. That's the meeting Jerry's referring to. My own personal view, and we continue to talk about this, is that the AHAC's support for implementing a meals tax is where we ought to be focused on, rather than trying to suggest to the board precisely what the number ought to be, because there are a lot of moving parts having to do with the property tax rate and other, obviously, zillions of other demands on the budget. So that's my sense of in terms of our advocacy.
So if you look at the board, the questions that the board is asking, they're obviously very interested in doing it, but even those that have expressed support are interested in some of the details. For example, they have to hire staff in order to implement it. So there's a cost involved. How much is that? How about the restaurants? Their costs, are there going to be rebates to restaurants? Yeah, there are all kinds of, if you are interested in getting into the nitty-gritty details, that it is interesting to see what the questions are, but it isn't cost-free, and so they have to think about that issue.
Sure, Joe.
The other interesting, I think, parts of the dynamic is that based on the timing and some of the points that Marlene was talking about in terms of the outreach, et cetera, what's estimated in terms of impact for 26 is as of January. So it's just a half year of the 26 budget. And so the reality of whatever rate is adopted this year is going to be double plus, because I would imagine that the estimate for 26 is very conservative to recognize the fact that it's going to get started up, that there are going to be smart costs. And so whatever the rate is, even assuming it stays the same for the second year, the revenue that's materializing from it is gonna at least double. So that's another interesting part of our calculus.
Do you have anything on this?
No, I'm
Okay.
typing up.
Oh, you're
the-
typing, Jerry?
No.
So, yeah, again, we only get a half year's worth of value for a meals tax approved on March 18th.
Yes, I understand that.
So, and then as Joe said, the challenge is, how do you make sure that half a year's worth of rate gets balanced with the real
Right.
estate rate? And that's where I believe there's tension on the boards of
I think there's
supervisors.
gonna be some pressure to move the real estate tax downwards. There is already, so that will need to be taken up by the meals tax if we're gonna even finance what the budget is now. There's gonna have to be, well, I guess they didn't count that. They just counted the property tax. But if you take away the property tax or half of it or some of it, that's gonna be have to made up somewhere else, right? So I don't know. I think our job is to advise the board what's best to do for the housing, not just say whatever you do is good. I just think as an advisory committee, we have to get in there and push for what we think is needed for affordable housing, because there's 70 other backs out there that some of which are going to advocate their issues. I don't want to, say take us and cut them. We're not into that. We're just into advocating for our issue.
So arguing for the implementation of a meals tax, I think is the most important thing for us to do in this March 18th timeline. I think all of us have the capacity to help the budget legislative committee by attending the magisterial district meetings and hearing what is being said, as well as offering our own perspectives on what is needed. There's nothing that stops anyone around the table from holding their own opinion on what should go. The whole of the AHAC, though, I think, is building our own capacity to be influential. So if I wanted to, I've argued 6 cents, up to 6% as a meals tax, I pay 10% when I go to the district. That's one thing to be done, as Jerry Poggi advocating at a magisterial district meeting. It's another thing for us as an AHAC to be sensitive to the constraints operating in a different way at the board and win the battle of the meals tax getting in with our strong support, and then shaping its ability and productivity in the out years.
Joe and then Tom.
I absolutely agree, and I would again emphasize the fact that in the larger context of the budget, not only is the core penny included as recommendation, but the reductions to housing overall were very, very, very modest in a year when there were significant reductions taken in a number of agencies, including public safety, which is very unusual. And so I think just from practical terms, and back to one of the points Jerry made initially about the feedback you got from the chairman yesterday, being overly aggressive, I don't think is the right approach this year.
Yeah. I don't know why I keep, saying thank you is really in vogue these days, right?
Many times.
So as often as you can. So
You wore a suit yesterday.
I did wear a suit, yeah. So just in terms of the tone of this.
Yeah.
Of whatever we're gonna do, it seems to me that this is our opportunity to say, thank you, you've taken our suggestions into account. I have no problem with us expressing a continued sense of urgency and that we want the board to keep these issues at the very top of its list. A general support for the flexibility that a meals tax would bring to housing, hopefully someday. But Mary, now putting my political hat firmly on. My sense of this is that we ought not weigh in on the question of should it be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. That's too down in the weeds, it seems to me, for this organization. But that we ought to say we like the idea of broadening the options available to the board to fund important things in the county like housing.
And diversity.
And diversify our revenue sources. That's my sense of what the sort of general tone of what we want to do should say. Tom, did you want to?
Yeah, just really briefly, my perspective as staff, I would endorse the idea of, you know, a statement of support rather than a specific number. My concern is that a statement about a specific number could tend to be seen as sort of an effort to kind of connect housing directly to this as a revenue source. And I would just very much caution against
Could go down.
creating that that perception.
Back to the motion.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I don't think there's yet unanimity on the board about how to approach this question, which means there are people who are elected to office who really have to work with each other on how to shape that. I'm not quite sure we hold expertise at AHAC level to make that recommendation. I feel I could make that recommendation at next week's Hunter Mill District. But I'm not ready to kind of change the capacity that AHAC has had over the last several years in being very influential on the budget. Go ahead, Mary.
I would say Mary, and then I'll bring us to it.
Okay, so what we do have some expertise on is what the needs of housing are, and I recommend that after we thank the board and everybody else profusely, I agree with that, gratitude's in, but do it, start with that, but at some point, I think we should look at what we need right now and mention that, bring that out. You say you're worried about being tied to the meals tax. We're tied to the property tax, and that's the thing that's going to get cut, if anything. I mean, what if they cut the 1/4 out of the property tax? That's
We've
what's
still
the
got a
deal.
percentage of it.
Okay, but I think there's some danger to the wraparound services. That's what I see in looking through the cuts in the budgets. I see cuts going on at CSB, at neighborhood community services, at places that help wraparound. I'll defer to the people in the nonprofits who actually deal with that, but I think we should say these are the things we need a lot more of, and these are some things that are being cut. They're going in the wrong direction.
I
That's it.
move that that AHAC send a memo to the Board of Supervisors prior to the hearing on March 18th, saying that we support the imposition of a meals tax for all reasons we spoke of, diversifying revenue, et cetera, and that we urge the board to advertise this in order to give themselves as much flexibility as possible in making their budget decisions. Some words to that effect.
Carrie, did you
Wait
want
a
to?
second.
Could I amend that site just, and also endorsing the Kent Board of Penny?
Oh, yeah, of course. That we knew that. That goes without saying.
Jill has.
Board of Pen.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. The only thing I was going to add to that is the points that Jerry laid out in the beginning of really, again, and that Joe spoke to in terms of our strategy on the second part. There's the two-phase strategy, continuing the budget guidance, everything. I just want to assure everybody, the conversation with Jeff was deep, and it was about getting to the 2 pennies or what's needed. That we didn't leave anything off the table, and he understood and heard the appreciation, and I think was very frank. And we had a long conversation about what we are all facing, the uncertainty that the board's going to need to come in as Rick goes back to Richmond, as they figure out what's the implication of the federal work. So I think this idea of they are very well aware of the need for additional revenue and how they will use that to plug the gaps that are coming, that we are going to be faced with. So I just wanted to share that. in addition, and I feel pretty comfortable. And we have the start of a draft for the memo on the new revenue source that will also start with the thank you, and we'll have more detailed comments on the proposed budget, which includes the additional quarter penny, and we love you and all of that. And as you approach this, we take Marlene's comments and those. So we'll have that in a one-page statement that can go to Board of Supervisors and out to all of you.
Needs a vote.
And
Is there more input on the
We're allowed to have,
draft rough statement that we seem to have
we vote.
affirmed and seconded?
yeah, the only thing just to address sort of Mary's points, and some of this is just plain old wordsmithing, but I don't think anyone who's in the meeting yesterday envisions any implication in what we want to send to the Board of Supervisors that we don't recognize, and we don't think the Board of Supervisors should fail to recognize the urgent needs to continue to move forward, to continue to find ways to do more in housing, to do more in the budget. But in terms of this budget that they're getting ready to address and to vote on, we'll
I'd only urge
say
people,
what Marlene was talking about, but I just don't want Mary or anyone to think that there's any backing off of sort of the clear urgency as we move into the out years to continue to have the board focus on funding housing and increasing the funding for housing, for wraparound and all that entails. Is that anyone?
and at our Monday meeting, which all people received the invitation to attend, we did put the 2025 AHAC, budget statement, which was, a 4-page long statement, which fleshed out more particulars in what's already in the budget, and that's still yet to be formed. So I would just offer to those who want to have particular items be elevated, that's a place within which we could consider that.
So we have a motion that's properly seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion, or should we vote?
I don't understand. Are you writing one letter or two letters?
One letter.
One
No.
letter, but
One
not,
letter right now for before the March 18th meeting.
you're not talking about yet the budget letter. You're talking about the advertised.
Correct.
Remote people can't hear.
Did they not?
You've turned me off. I don't know what I said. I think now, there we go. Now I like this a lot. All right, any further discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Put your hands up. Is there any opposition? All right, great. Motion passes.
Great. I think then the second piece of that goes into the communications and engagement committee, and John started some conversation. I will say that we will, in getting this information out to everybody in the final letter, we'll republish the town halls and encourage everybody to attend those that are in your district, or get your friends and family to attend with those 4 key points, which include the statement on the meals tax. And so that's one thing that we can get out to you very quickly for next week. John, Ava.
Okay. Well, thank you. Not where I wanted to be with the communications. I want to be further along than we are. But every day is progress. So it just, one thing is just kind of on my heart. So Wednesday morning, I'm on another board for the Committee for Dallas, and they showed a slide of a long line of people, and it was up to a 45-minute wait to get into luxury lounges. So there's a problem getting into the luxury lounges at Dallas Airport. I mean,
sounds awful.
I know, and we've got folks here, they can't find a bed and they're sleeping on the floor, and we've got some people here. So I mean, that actually comes back to the communications. It comes back to what we need to do with industry. This isn't a problem where we throw it to the government and say, hey, come fix our problem and give me more money. We got to figure this out, right? And there's plenty of ways to do that. Starts with sharing the story, telling the communications. And so step one, and I've shared before the different groups, but we need to get out and make sure each of the budget meetings is covered. So feel free. I feel a little stymied. I was trying to be more inclusive. In my mind, I'm going to send out emails, I'm going to have everything going, but the concern is that we follow the rules, probably more in the letter than the spirit of the law. And we kind of make sure everything's covered, and we give enough warning for other people to help us. So I get that. My thought was emails are discoverable, right? We go through our training. As long as I send an emails, they can always come back. So we want to give more time to the staff to allow them, other folks and citizens to view it. My thought is we need to create a monthly subcommittee Zoom. And then we can do whatever we want with it. But as long as we have that, they cover it. What I'm trying not to do is add more work to staff. Every time, they got enough work to do. They don't need to be helping us. But if I at least had a block of time, whether it's once a month, we could use it for communications. We can use it for, communications. One part of the communication we talked about coming up with the elevator speeches, the facts. We could create just those subsections of people that want to be interested, or for the industry piece that Jill and I are working on, that would be a placeholder, because I know there are a lot of folks that are frustrated. They want to get involved and do more. And one of the reasons we were able to have great conversations because this group doesn't get together all the time, right? Some of the folks that we think are in the industry and see each other and have a conversation, they're busy doing their job. So this becomes even more valuable than just an AHAC council quarterly meeting. It's a chance to network and have discussions and conversations. So need to do a better job, and I promise to do that. Ava has been leading the effort for the social media. The other problem I have, because I know we talked about op-eds as kind of the leading edge, I'm blown away by the numbers. When you look at things like the Washington Post, where they are with the digital media, and then you see what social media and the podcasts. I mean, the Washington Post is down to 2 million. It used to be 22 million. They're down to 2 million readers. And then a podcast, like whether it's a Republican or Democrat, 64 million. I mean, it's nuts. So as we may feel good about writing something, right, or standing up and shouting something, and a lot of people are doing that these days, regardless of your political persuasions. We need to think about how to be thoughtful, right, and win hearts and minds. I think part of that is Ava is leading the effort with social media. We need to spend more time to be thoughtful. And there's also some techniques about social media instead of just posting, right? And I'm not the pro at all, but if you just repost, right? Tom sends out stuff. And if we're not connected to Tom, and Ava's going to talk about this in a minute, we need to be connected to Tom, right? And Tom has been posting stuff, even if it's about advertising for jobs, to help get more people to help us do and advocate for affordable housing. Just reposting, it's a plus. If you repost with at least 4 words, it actually gets higher in that response rate, right? So there's things. So add something to the post. If this is really important from Tom Fleetwood, repost it, right? Or I really like this idea, repost it. That's going to elevate you. So they're all right. Everybody likes AI. AI is going to save the world. There are lots of tools and techniques that allow you to get higher and broader coverage. So those are things that we'll learn and get better at. But to start with, we got to be connected with Tom so he can share the stuff with the housing authority and where we're going and all the jobs and what's happening. And I think that becomes more important than just writing an op-ed piece. So Ava?
And so we had a quick meeting a few weeks ago. So again, part of our communication group, we're going to try to educate, advocate, and do outreach. So we actually have it on paper. So David just helped me fill out the rest of the emails of a few members who signed up to be on social media, and just, piggybacking on what John just said. So if we reshared Tom, we're going to make Tom a superstar through the SEO, but liking his LinkedIn or posting it, it really shares it. And I'm no expert, but just something like that, that's the educating part of it. Because a lot of people, they don't subscribe to reading that, but now it's out there. Or if you're good with your Facebook or your Instagram, do a quick blurb on it and share it. Jill, you came to NVAR this past Monday to our policy meeting, and a lot of our members were really interested in affordable housing, but wanted more information. So I said, make sure you sign up on Navaja's newsletter. They're really
easy to understand, da, da, da. So now we're spreading it. So it's lighting the fire and just spreading it. So how do we do more of that? Like outreach, we already have a list. So something as little as signing up for talking to the Rotary Club or to the HOA, because once we educate the neighbors and the citizens, they won't be so afraid. You know, they'll be more, what do you call it, YIMBY?
Yeah.
YIMBY versus NIMBY, because now they have a better understanding. And it was interesting because one of the agent asked, so we used to be so scared like a Section 8 or so, but we talked about what the faces looked like in workforce housing or how much the income was. And they were floored when they realized, I think it was like 80% of the AMI in our area was roughly around over 100,000. It was about 112, 122, I forgot, but something like that. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah. So, and then what's workforce housing? So the definition of what that is opened a lot of eyes. So they're more open to policy. So we have a policy kind of, what do you call it? Brain dump coming up. So a lot of them signed up to go to it because they're going to push affordable housing. And they appreciated it. Remember when we did the faces of affordable housing case studies? They appreciated that because it brought it to where they can relate and understood how it affects them if we lost these folks in our community. So going back, we got it. The op-ed is there. The outreach, I think it's really important. And we can rotate, we can get a schedule and the social media, and then it goes back to the Board of Supervisor testimonials. I know Carrie offered her spot for speakers, but again, how do we come up with the topics? So we try to, because I think we have so many topics and we're confused and we're trying to look for old notes, but that's something that I'll try to work with David, Megan, all of them. What are the topics? So today I wrote down meals tax, property tax, but what are some facts or trivia, how the meals tax can help us versus more painful to our pocket to go out, right? But if this is this much, how many more homes can we house people, right? And property tax, ooh, we don't like that word in real estate, but how does that help us overall? And then, of course, I heard the quarter penny dedication. Let me know. I'll do the whole thing on that. Retaining HCD staff, of course, right? All that information. So let me know how I can craft it. But we're here to help you. So John is my expert. And then just tell me. And then I have an assistant that helped me with it. She's happy to do all of that. So that's kind of where we're at communication.
Thanks, Ava. So if anybody, so we're going to get a list out that we have folks already signed up. Some folks weren't at the last meeting. If you're interested, just let us know. We'll get the outreach for the speakers. We'll kind of reach out to the chambers and the Rotaries and find people. If you have folks who are interested, let us know, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of matchmaking and get that going a lot more aggressively. So thank you. So David, we can get those out. Eleanor.
Okay. So I have a question, but first, thank you so much for doing this. I think we've been talking about it for a long time. And really, you can do awesome work, but if nobody cares about it and they don't know what the ROI is, then I'm gonna give you, invest in what you're doing. So spot on. I really applaud that. A couple of questions and thoughts. So first question really has to do with the fact that, nonprofits, even we putting our stories out there, and we usually don't have a huge budget to do it. So we get to be very creative in how we do that, making that case. And so as you were talking about partnering people up with like the Rotary Club and things like that, the first thought that jumped into my head was, so how do we, leverage is not the word, but some of us are already out there doing this stuff. But we want to layer on top of that AHAC. So I think there has to be some consideration for how we navigate that so that, for example, if you show up, and you're talking to the same people, it's not now at Lamb Center or me. It's about Pathway Homes, but it's about AHAC and the broader community. So I think that's one point of consideration. And then the other thing is, in terms of the education piece, we have a a lot of opportunities to really educate the public. But I think it's important that we give them the broad scope of the phases of people in affordable housing. Because, you know, we have, when we talk about, you know, we talk about 50-60% to 120% AMI. But we talk with the people that some of us provide services to, they're 30%. I mean, 30% AMI, people making about $32,000 a year. 50% is about $54,000 a year. Most of the people we serve are making about $10,000 a year, right? And these are still people who live in these communities. The people most likely to be targets of NIMBYism. That NIMBYism that we're talking in my backyard, when we're educating folks who really want to know like what we're doing, who we're serving, who's benefiting, and how these people make their communities better, not worse. Really, my recommendation, and really from an advocacy perspective, from a personal, professional perspective, as a service provider, we have to do like a broad spectrum education. Otherwise, people are going to walk away with reinforced ideas that are based on myths. And ultimately, it doesn't help our process. So that's my thoughts. And
No, thank you. And just a thought, like even if you read or heard a good podcast or good article, reshare that, or if you want, send it to us and we'll reshare it. But I think I was talking to Hef earlier, and he shared something in a Scandinavian, was it Norway or was it? A Nordic country, but kind of sharing ideas like that. That's where we start opening up our mind and be more innovative in how we can achieve it. But it's going to get somebody's brain juices going, and it starts the conversation or researching a little bit. I shared with him something I heard like in San Francisco where they have a communal living space. And this morning I heard some like Japanese women living together, and because they're supporting each other, and that helps with also the brain, the social, but having like a central kitchen, but everybody has their own room. So how does that affect with the rule in Fairfax County where no more than two unrelated people, four unrelated, but here's 7 women who's mid-70s, 80s, living their best life, supporting each other. So how do we address those things and they can afford to still stay in our community? Just things like that. And I think that's where you spark innovation.
I have a quick question. So thank you, Eleanor, for bringing up the extremely low income community that we have here in our county. So just, my community, from Ecuador, I believe it's like 53.5% of renters currently in Fairfax County are severely cost burdened. That number is only going to rise. So when we're talking about storytelling and community engagement, I'd love to better understand, like, where are we present in terms of community meetings that are happening regarding affordable housing or food insecurity, et cetera, so that we can also be visible to the community to let them know we're here to support what you need. I live in Herndon, and I've been to a few meetings around the housing crises that we have, but it goes beyond shortage of housing. It's landlord abuse. I get calls quite frequently from community members talking about, the landlord won't give me my money back. Or there's, very difficult situations that the community is facing. And certainly when you have a family of 5, paying nearly $1,000 a month to live in one room, you have such abuse that is happening in our communities. And I don't think that's reaching this space. So I'd love to really think through, what are we doing? Yes, we need to inform industry and investors, et cetera, but also what are we doing to really have input from community members that are severely burdened by what is happening, and the situation is only getting worse. So I think I'd love to, continue talking with you, John, about how do we just let the community know that we're here to really ensure that their needs are present, and the stories that we're bringing to the Board of Supervisors, really putting a face to the story, humanizing everything that we're dealing with right now. Because there's so much fear in the community. Getting our community to come out and speak at a public hearing is going to be a tough call.
Yeah.
So if we can be that, that like conductor, or like that avenue, so that these stories are really being visualized, so we can get greater investment, have to, be a thought partner in that process. Thanks.
Thank you, Lorena. Amazing and the work that you're doing. I think we have been better and we've seen wonderful organizing efforts from around the county, and people have turned out to the public hearing. But it's, every year for the budget hearing, and Chairman McKay said to us yesterday, yeah, let's hear from the people that are really experiencing this. That's always compelling, and that's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear from Carrie or Jerry, right? And but we've done that. Talking about is really that year round. And I think, Tom started by saying, a really great effort that was made by the county to have a conversation about what's happening. The first meeting was with the community members, not open to the whole. It was really, sitting down there. And I think the more that we do this, I know we can count on you to help us in our organizing and the statements collecting, whether it's video statement or written statements, as we did at our last Opportunity Neighborhoods meeting, to share with people. It has an impact even if people are concerned, fearful about coming forward and being in public. So we will definitely, I think that's where the committee wanted to.
Jerry and then Mary.
Yeah, I just would say also, Mary's been very involved in the Franconia district with working with groups to get video recordings of people so that even if they can't make the exact night and the exact time, they have the ability to penetrate into consciousness in that community. And we need to all build that skill set across the dome of social media, because that video could also be transmitted in other ways to other people. I also think, though, it's so important for us to own our own immigrant family narrative. All four of my grandparents were low-income wage immigrants. Two grandmothers aspiring to be domestics in somebody else's home, cooking and cleaning. And here I am today. We have to break the animosity, the stupid animosity to immigrant people. The estimate is if you took all of the immigrants and extended 75 years out, do you know what the economic contribution is? $10.3 trillion into the American economy. To think about slicing that off is such a self-defeating stupidity, because we lose so much if we don't embrace the other in our midst. It's painful maybe the first few years, but it's worth the struggle. And I think that's for all of us to begin to be open and honest, but particularly for people with white male privilege and 74 years old, to be adding that to our narrative as we advocate for others.
Thank you, Jerry. Mary?
Yeah, I was going to mention our video workshops. We haven't quite figured out how to, what we do is set up a guy with a video camera at a church for like 4 hours on a Saturday and put out a lot of flyers and email and get people to come. And we've also hooked up with a couple networks. But we haven't figured out yet how to turn that into social media. Right now, we're just taking testimony, but I agree that that's something that could be done. And I wanted to mention something about immigrants too. I see that as a real possible catastrophe coming from the feds as well. We've got a lot of immigrants in Route 1 area, and we had a meeting yesterday about the faith communities and nonprofits. And we had people at the federal and county level and a couple of immigration attorneys talking about how faith communities can help immigrant neighbors, how to keep them safe, we got all the red cards and the yellow cards and all the advice from the attorneys. But one of the things that's going to happen is that a lot of the breadwinners are going to get deported, and there'll be even poverty upon poverty, and there's going to be a lot of evictions, and there's going to be a lot of need that's even worse than the current need. So I think we always need to keep that in mind when we're advocating for money and help and support. That that's going to be awful if it happens, and who knows. But yeah, they're frightened too. Everybody's hiding behind the curtains.
Thank you for doing that, Mary. Anything else to add on this topic? The only thing I would add, first off, thank you for doing what you're doing. I think I've told this group this story before. When I head to Richmond and issues of housing or whatever might come up, there is this frustrating view among a lot of my colleagues down there that everybody in Fairfax County is rich. And that Fairfax County doesn't suffer from any challenges relating to whether it's homelessness or issues in the schools. So I can tell you statewide that frustrates me. And I know everyone around this table is frustrated by the fact that here, even within our county, it's surely true. I'll just confess, in my neck of the county, when you start to talk to people about homelessness, I was with Homestretch for many, many years. And when I was raising money for a Homestretch and talking about homeless families, there are no homeless families in Fairfax County. What are you talking about? So there's a huge awareness mountain for us to climb. And
people in Fairfax County who also don't know that there are homeless people.
Exactly.
That's part of the problem.
Exactly. So thank you for taking this on. I mean, we got a long way to go, but you got to start somewhere. And it sounds to me like we're making a lot of progress. So thank you. And everyone around this table has some network that they can tap into to help us fix this problem. Any other comments on this issue? I think, yes, Eleanor.
I just wanted to say Tom Fleetwood is already a rock star, so he doesn't need that.
Have 4 million viewers.
You're about to see the world's first reported death of embarrassment.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have about 15 minutes left. John.
We didn't talk about business. I was hoping, even though we sent it out, can we talk about the business?
Oh,
Of course. Sure.
yeah, sure. So I apologize. That was on me not to notify you all that the Tyson's Community Alliance was hosting a session. They do quarterly market updates on what's happening in Tyson's. They focused on affordable housing. Last month, it was a great reporting. Tom did a great job, and I think it spoke to the heart of what we're trying to do and to get that out to our corporate partners about the need for their support in affordable housing. So it was Amazon Housing Equity Fund, True Ground Housing Partners, SCG Development, the developers who are responsible for adding hundreds and hundreds of units, almost 1,000 units, right, in Tyson's alone. So it was a great conversation. And Tom, of course, leading the charge, just speaking about really what it takes to get these deals done, frankly, in such a high cost market. But the opportunity that's there, given transit and all of the growth and development that's happening in Tyson's, and how affordable, as Nick mentioned, leads the way, right? When we have a downturn, we're really insulated in the affordable housing development community to be able to often be the only cranes in the sky that you're seeing. And I think we're going to continue to see that. So thanks to our complicated and multi-layered financing schedule, system, we have that. So if you have the time, I think it was a great conversation. Touched on a lot of the issues that we're trying to lean into, and then really on us to kind of take that further to other corporate, sponsors to just help demonstrate and illustrate that it's not on one individual or one sector to do all of this, that we have to come together, industry, government, other state partners, federal partners, local partners, and, with the mindset that we are trying to serve a continuum of people at different levels of income, as Eleanor and Lorena both spoke to, and elevate the issues that people are facing. That's our hardest job. I think that's my hardest job, is like we meet and we can be really excited about all of the pipeline we have, but then really recognizing the people who are suffering with housing challenges right now that are going to be the first people impacted by any additional cuts, and just trying to continue to lift that up as we communicate with our constituents and our Board of Supervisors. And again, really appreciate your comments, Lorena, about recognizing people who are afraid to come out and testify this year more than ever. And I think that's on us to kind of demonstrate that. We have our amazing tenant advocacy partners, a lot of you in this room, and just trying to support one another and the issues that immigrants and really vulnerable populations suffering from chronic homelessness are going to face coming up. So thank you.
Great. John.
If I could just add, I looked at that video yesterday and it's a terrific video. It also is chock full of the data that uniquely serves the Tyson's Community Alliance. They look at the trajectory of the development of the whole community and have a very rich data set that says, well, here's how retail is going. Here's how residential is going. Here's how office occupancy is going. And it is a prelude to the rich conversation, the leader of the Amazon investment fund describing how they got involved with Somos and with the exchange project. And Tom describing the complexity and added complexity of his being able to drag in neighborhood and community services into saying, in the exchange, we could actually have a community center that would serve not just the residents, all affordable in that huge structure, but the surrounding community, thereby building a sense of equity across the landscape. It's a marvel of vision. And it really is quite helpful for us to be owning that. So we can say, wait a minute, you don't understand why this is such a great opportunity for us to build a much more beloved and effective Fairfax. This is terrific, and it's happening right as we speak. It's just a very powerful way of engaging people at all different levels, whatever entree point they're coming into. It's just to build the enthusiasm for getting more done.
Thanks, Jerry. John?
Thank you. So I got 4 points. I'll be brief, and it's meant to be as you're driving away, you're like, oh, it's like when I have coffee with Jerry, I bring a blank piece of paper. I go, oh, well, there's another good idea. First is a dashboard. And I'm sure everybody has some sort of dashboard. You're familiar with the concept, but I think there are some things that are going to happen or may happen that would be good, kind of, ticklers for us to recognize there's a problem. Obviously, eviction rates, right? Eviction court cases, homelessness rates, how many people are sleeping on the floor up at cornerstones or overflow beds. There are things to look at that know that that number is going to go up, right? We're at 10,000 is great, but we're going to need to know more. But we need data. And I think if there were and this is not to do staff for you guys to do anything, but we should be thinking about it. Maybe there's somebody like George Mason University that could be thinking about a dashboard that will allow us to kind of check in and see things. I don't know everything should be on there, but you guys are all pros and do. The second thing is the conference, right? So Tom knows because I'm pinging in the background of this. In terms of the business that Jill and I are trying to work on, I think that conference could be really, really important because this is back where, I harp on it. It's not telling government, you got to do this, you need to do this to help us. We need to turn to the others. And the businesses, Amazon is the model, but they're not the only one. There are plenty of banks that have been doing this. There are plenty of folks. Nick, you've been around, you've seen all, certainly Jill and others. There are folks willing to help with big numbers and lots of zeros. And we need to position that so they can say yes. What do they say yes to? How do I help? The conference, I think, could be a great place, but it's not a burden on Tom and the staff to say, there's a place for you to speak. We need to condition that just like a sales cycle, right? And everybody in here has been sold or didn't realize it. 7 touches on a sales cycle. We need to be putting those touches on the businesses now before we get to the conference so they can say yes, right? Or they say yes after the conference when we do a special breakfast for them to join together and embarrass each one of them because the others have done so much more. We need to be thinking about conditioning, not just the conference itself. Tom's worried about that, but let's think about what we could do leading up to it and make that business piece really important. I think that'll drive some zeros and it gives us another additional revenue resource for us to give dollars. The other one is, and this is crazy, and hopefully shut the camera off. The Route 28 tax district, right? I live out by Route 28. I was there with the chamber, ran the chamber on that 28 corridor. As part of it, most of it goes to Loudon, right? The 28 tax district. That's actually going to expire, right? So if you're in the business and you've been providing it, that was asked for by those businesses to tax us because we got to do something for this Route 28 overpass and lights so we get people moving. It worked great. but it's going to expire. So if you're a business, you're like, great, that's a piece of money I don't have to pay. But what if we converted that 28 tax district to say that money can go to affordable housing, and the housing conditions are affordable housing will be built within 1 mile of Route 28. So it goes to your businesses, your employees get particular preferences in order to get the housing. Let's think about, again, this is the challenge, and hopefully spark some new ideas. Let's think about a tax district instead of just a meals tax or a casino. Anybody? What about a casino? No, I'm looking. What are those things that we might be able to do? That's one that actually exists with Loudoun that might be a collaborative regional opportunity for us, or create another tax district that all these folks in terms of a business saying, no, I need workers. We don't help ourselves, and I'll take it as an action too. I want to write a white paper to share with just the council. We got to think differently about AMI. When we talk about AMI and the percentages, we need to talk about the person that works in giant stocking shelves. We need to talk about the barista. We need to talk about the second year Fairfax County public school teacher or Loudoun County public school teacher. What do they make a number, and it's there, and that's the number. As soon as we say AMI, people go, they're done. They stop listening to us. So we need to be thinking about those models and use them as different examples when we talk about folks. And the last thing is policy wise, right? So Nick's got me thinking in the back, only because I did this when I was in the Air Force. I ran export controls. So anybody wanted to sell overseas, and it would take months. And we sat down with somebody else who we both got promoted in these positions, and we cut the time down to literally days because we had breakfast one morning and said, this process is stupid. So we stopped the process and changed how we did it. And what we did is we saved a lot of money and time. There are some really hard problems that take a long time. Everything else doesn't. And so if we could figure out a way to take that 6 years and cut it to 3 years, to cut it to a year, what is the right time in order to review, start the idea and finish out the process? And I don't want to, and it can't be on folks with Nick's community, because they've got to work with folks who might be perceived. But if we were to go to George Mason University, ask them to help us think through the process or find best practices, because there's all these people involved in the process, certainly with Tom, with planning, with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. I got why we do all that. We've got to make it smaller. Because the cost of money alone, the debt servicing, what are we doing for how much it costs to take that time? Not to hit into the attorney's fees. Of course, they'll.
Yeah, come on now.
We can save some time and money, and therefore we start trying to get to that 10,000 number or higher. Then it becomes even more attainable. So again, that's something else I think we could be looking at in terms of not just asking the government to do more for us. We need to be thinking with the businesses, maybe with our educational folks, to team with us to look at the processes to make it more effective. So
there's a chainsaw joke to be made here, but I'm not going to make it. Tom, you wanted to?
Just a couple things really briefly. I want to first of all acknowledge that John took a real gamble mentioning the casino. With respect to the dashboard, though, I just want to note that we're going to be rolling out, sort of a new and updated version of our dashboard at the board's housing committee on March the 25th. So I wanted to.
And there are other dashboards, but it's how we look at that data together. That's what your point.
you can set up an AI to kind of pull things and then just.
We can call on that. we're gonna, David we didn't, when we started the meeting, we neglected to introduce David and Megan. We all know them, but I want to just acknowledge really the people that are doing this work and keeping us moving forward. But you see, we have our upcoming meetings. I'm really taken by the fact that the YIMBY group is really organizing the testimony right now for Franconia, and they're having fun parties, let's around, do the videos. And I love that. And I think we certainly should be drawing in younger or advocates that are looking things a different way. So, but on Franconia, Tom, do you want to say anything about that hearing?
There's going to be a hearing. But I would say, I mean, this is sort of the beginning, really the beginning of the land use process, and the SSPA that you see is about, not only the Franconia Government Center site, but sort of that entire triangle there. And, but certainly some of the challenges that AHAC works to overcome relative to public perception have been on, vivid display.
Yeah.
Throughout this process, and will continue to be on display. And I would just, recommend this and any other hearing related to this particular project as being real opportunities for your voices to be heard.
And I think that people have been involved, but I think continuing, we'll share any information about that. And I just call your attention to the 1-year action plan. Again, March 18th is a big day. There's a lot of hearings, including the, advertisement of a meals tax. But I know Maura is coordinating, testimony for Cornerstones to comment on this plan. And I think it's every opportunity to talk about the needs in housing and, it's a great one. So if you can submit testimony, and of course, we have the WDU administrative guidelines that Megan mentioned.
The hearing on the 1-year consolidated.
And the 1-year consolidated action plan is that same night. Meetings coming up. The Housing Committee meeting you already heard, March 25th, and really want to thank our visitors from down the Silver Line who joined us today. And there is a lot of opportunity, I think, and John, thank you for bringing that up just in terms of how that works, but a lot of opportunity to work together to tackle some of these things and learn from each other. That certainly was apparent. Mary Payton leads our fair housing efforts, and certainly the regional response to fair housing was really critical. So.
Absolutely.
It is 11:29, I think. 11:30, right on the nose, right on the nose. I don't see any hands or lights lit up. Thank you, everyone. I think this has been a terrific meeting. We've got a lot to be proud of and a lot more work to do. We are adjourned.
Thank you all so much for accommodating me.
I'd like to follow
I was
up.
glad I could be here. Thank you. Thank you
Oh, good.
especially.
Oh,
for-
Then we'll continue to look.
No, I'm in a draft.
Thank you.
That night, so I'm gonna go to the online.
So basically,
That's the, so.
the groups,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
like testimony, and then you can schedule them if you want.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
good to see is, oops.
You know, it was
To
very
see. So
interesting.
these are just some things, so let me know. how to do them. And then here's we just got.
No, I would.
Because it was, yeah, and then he folded in, so then we'll continue to look up like Facebook, and Instagram. And then we'll say like, can you do this? It's very action, so 1, 2, 3, if you can do this, or this.
Ask them all to.
Yeah, just, if you say, hey, John, can you do it? And you're like, what? Like, I have to think of it.
Remember,
We have to, like, hey, can you, like, hey, everyone, or email everyone and say, Tom Rose says, can you guys read it, share it, like it? It's very, no thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's like another job.
Hey, great to speak to the policy.
I know, you did such a.
No, they were such a great guidance and obviously and interested and
No,
so.
they want more.
Yeah,
They're
okay,
hungry.
well, I'm happy to have another time and like do a deeper dive if there's anything they want to know about, but they were awesome for new housing developments because they.
Yeah,
care.
no, a lot of them are HOA.
Yes.
So I'm gonna push
Yes.
to bring it.
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
glad you guys are tackling.
You know?
I promise to
Right,
keep my
like
mouth
the best.
shut.
She's
And,
Hey, she's
amazing,
amazing.
but it's so.
That's my
easy
question.
to